Hey guys, Steve here. Today I'm going to be building another motorized bicycle. Now I got this bike for free from my dad. It is a little different than my last motorized bicycle. They're both Huffies, but this one is actually a 6-speed. So when you pedal backwards, it doesn't have the brake. It actually kind of does that clicking thing for you. Now the kit I bought is very similar to the last one I bought. This one seems to be a little nicer, as in it has a instruction book that came with it that it's actually in color. So if you don't know what you're doing, this is a good one. I'll leave a link to the one that I bought. But these kits are basically all the same. Now this one is silver compared to painted black like my last one. My dad said he had this bike. He was basically saying it was a white bike, so I bought a silver kit for it. But in retrospect, should have got another black one, but we're going to try this one out. So everything that came in the last kit came in this one. So let's just get started, and the first thing we got to do is we need to take off this back wheel. Right at our back wheel, you'll see the big sprocket that comes on the bike. Now, to take the wheel off, we're going to have to remove the bolts that are on either side of it. But in order to get the chain off, this has a big spring action that actually tightens the chain. So all you can do is flip this forward with your hands. It's just spring action, and you just grab the chain and you just work it into a spot that's not on there. Now we can remove the 2 bolts and get the wheel off. When you have a bike that has caliper brakes on it, the brake pad is actually going to get in your way of removing the tire. So instead of removing the cable to loosen up the caliper, just take off one of the brake pads, and then you should be able to get that tire off nice and easy. So here's our tire. Here's the sprocket that came on the bike. So we're going to take this and actually flip it over. So we're going to be working on the other side. That's where the big sprocket's going to go. If we look at the big sprocket, there's actually a bump out on here. So you want the sprocket to actually bump away from the tire, bump up. So if you're running your finger on this, it's going to run across and then bump up away from the tire. That'll give your chain some clearance from the spokes. Now, in order to put this on here, we're going to be taking these 2 rubber circles that we have that have holes drilled into them. We're going to be taking these 3 metal plates and then a bunch of long bolts, washers, and nuts. So at these, you just kind of cut one of them in half. Not in half, I should say. You just want to cut on one side of them here. So cut in between 2 of the circles. I'm just using a pair of tin snips. Now these appear to be made out of old tires, so they're going to be very thick to cut. Now the one that you cut, you're going to put on the inside, and you're going to put around the shaft. And then your other one will go on top, right around the circle. Your 3 metal plates will also go on the inside, on the opposite side of the rubber. So you're going to be sandwiching this rubber on the spokes. And then these metal plates will help keep it tight to the sprocket. Now, this is going to take a little bit, so I'm not going to waste your time. So here it is, all said and done. It took me a little while. This is my least favorite part of doing this bike build. But luckily, this bike had a nice center shaft that this fit around. And what you want to do is make sure that this is even on all sides. So, because you don't want any wobble when it's spinning around. And if you need to, you can always take a hammer and a piece of wood and knock it around when these are still loose so that you can get it nice and centered there. So the bolt's there, and we got the nice long bolt, and you can see how those 2 rubber pieces of tire spacers are bolted in there with the piece of metal on the side there. So we can put this back on the bike, and then we can start installing the engine. So before I put the wheel on, this bike has a fender here, so we actually need to cut part of this fender off so that when the chain comes by, it won't be running into this side. So we can just kind of clip this. I'm going to be using a big grinder here with a cutoff wheel, so we can just cut in here. But you can use a pair of tin snips if you have them. Those work pretty well. This is just a little easier, so we'll give that a try. Now that we got the back wheel on, our brake replaced, and our chain on the bike, we can go ahead and do the big part. Put in the engine. So this is a silver engine, just like every other Chinese engine there. This one was kind of nice where they already had all the hardware installed here. We'll have to remove this so that we can put it on the bike. Right here is where we're going to mount our motor. Now if you look at it, this little spout sticks to the back tire right here. and the spark plug sticks to the front of the bike. So I put on some pieces of foam here just to kind of protect my paint for when I put this in here. And I want to point out that this post right here is actually really, really thick. So on the bike, it would not fit into this circle here. So it comes with this metal plate that you bolt on. Now you can remove these long studs if you want and bolt right in, but I'm going to use this as a spacer so I can keep my engine a little bit higher. So you put this metal plate in, and then this big U-bolt gets stuck in here. Now I just ran some nuts right here to make this a little bit longer, and then this piece of metal that's kind of bent, I'm going to stick right on the end there, and it's just going to rest there. It's not going to be bolted down, but that is just going to rest onto the post, and then I can run the big U-bolt around there. So let's go ahead and do that. Now that we got our engine bolted on the front and on the back, we're going to go ahead and we're going to remove this plate right here by removing these 3 screws. Now just so you know, this screw is longer than these two. And we're going to use this screw to eventually put on a chain guard. So that's why that one's a little bit longer. Now make sure you use a very fat screwdriver, otherwise you will probably strip out these screws because sometimes they can be kind of soft. Now with that guard removed, you'll see this sprocket here. This is where the chain goes around. Now if you go through your bag of goodies, you'll find this tool that looks like this. So this is multi-purpose. This actually fits onto here so that you can actually spin this to help get the chain around. So you stick your screwdriver in there. Let's use a smaller screwdriver. And then you can actually spin this. Now the only way you can spin this is as long as you do not put in a spark plug. Because if you put a spark plug in, there's going to be compression and you will not be able to spin this by hand. So this tool is actually used to put in the spark plug too. So when you get that, that's what this is used for. So if you take your chain, you're going to look for this link right here. This is the master link. Now one end is open. Now in order to open up the chain, you just take your flathead screwdriver and you stick it in there. Better one there. And it just pops open. You remove this side. Remove this plate right here, and then you can remove these 2 halves. So we're going to put this into the bike so that we can see how long of a chain that we need to cut off. And I'll show you how I usually shorten these chains. If we take the end of the chain, stick it on there, then we use our tool. There we go. Run our chain over a sprocket. So if we were to put our chain in without cutting any links, this chain would be too long. So there's usually an idle wheel that's going to stick right here, and then we want this going to be tight. So let's see how many links can we remove. Probably about 5 total. So if we take our chain and run it in between 2 pieces of wood here, we're going to remove a couple of them. We're going to move these 2. So I'm going to use a nail set. This is what this is. This is used for usually pounding nails under the surface of wood. So I'm actually going to take that and put that right on top of one of these little pieces of metal. And I'm just going to use a hammer. And we'll just grab a pair of pliers, rip the rest of that out. And now we remove that many links. So now we can take our links and we can put them back together. We're going to take that, stick it in one end, put the chain in the other. Then we're going to take this flat piece, stick that on, and then this little lock piece we're going to send towards the back. I'm looking at the bottom of the chain. So the chain, top of the chain goes this way and it loops back and comes this way. So if we look at the bottom side here, if we look at this lock here, this is the bottom half of the chain. So the chain will be going this way. Now we want the blunt end to be on the side that it's going towards, and this to be on the side that it's coming from. So if we go this way, if this ever gets hit, it won't knock off that lock and blow your chain out. Going along with the chain, we're gonna find the idle wheel here. This is gonna bolt on here, and this is actually gonna keep what keeps the chain tight. Well, my other camera died, so I'm gonna switch over to the GoPro. I've gone ahead and I've removed the hand grip that's on here. This is the gear shift. Now, this is gonna be in the way for the throttle and kill switch assembly. So that needs to go on there. So I'm gonna remove this and actually put this on the other side. There's just an Allen wrench in here that's holding that in, an Allen screw. So I just loosened that up and it came off really easily. And then there's a Allen screw on here too. I'm gonna loosen this up so I can get it out of the way, because I'm gonna have to go ahead, I'm gonna have to drill a hole through this hand grip. Notice on the kill switch there's a little piece of metal that sticks in. That actually needs to go into this metal so that when we twist this doesn't twist as well. Otherwise it won't actually be giving you any throttle. So we're gonna drill a hole and then bolt this on. To figure out where this hole needs to be drilled, put it in the hand grip, take the two pieces that you're gonna be screwing together, put it on there, and then take this and press it together and squeeze it, and then you'll scratch up the metal. So there is a little bit of spot where I know I'm gonna drill. We're gonna grab our cable that's gonna go for our throttle, and you'll notice the one for the throttle, if you look at the very end where it has this little tiny nubbin on it, and that's actually gonna go into the carburetor. So this end will go into our throttle and this will go into the carburetor. So if we take our kill switch and we thread this into here, so we'll thread that through. We will stick our throttle onto shaft here, stick that in there. And then we're going to take that spot that we drilled in, put that there, and then we can bolt this together. And in place, we can put our brake back in place. Next, we'll deal with the carburetor. At the very top of the carburetor, we'll remove this part right here. Be careful, there is a spring in here. It can fly back at you. Take those things out. There is a needle and a Pac-Man washer. And then there is a little piece of metal here. So at the end of your throttle, there's that little nubbin. First thing you want to do is you want to take this and take the top of it and run your cable through it. Then you're going to take your spring and put that over here. Now this gets a little difficult because you're going to have to compress that spring with your hand. Take this piece of plastic and you're going to put in the needle into the large opening so it slips out the end. You're going to take this Pac-Man washer and line it up with the slit that's on the side. So our little nubbin sticks in the end, needle sticks out. Pac-Man's going to be down there at the end, and then our spring, and then our cap. And we can go ahead and we can line that up. There is a little, if you were to look into this carburetor, you will see a little piece of metal sticking out, and that's actually going to slide in this part right here. So just kind of line that up. Screw it on in. Nice and tight. Now if we were to use our throttle, you'll see that it opens up. And then we can go ahead and we can stick this onto the bike. Now that we got the throttle body on, we're going to take the two wires that come out of the throttle that are the kill switch, and we're going to be running those to the coil here. Now we're just going to mount the coil right onto this post, and instead of using the metal hardware, I'm just going to use some zip ties to zip tie this on. So we'll take the wires that come out of the kill switch and we'll wire one up to each of these wires out of the coil here. And then there are two wires that come out of the engine block. And for those, you just hook up the blue to the blue and the black to the black. And later on, we will zip tie all this down to the post. And make sure that none of the wires are touching the engine, because if the wires touch any part of this engine, they will melt. This wire that comes out of here is actually going to go to our spark plug. We'll actually put that in a little bit later. On the other side of the handlebars, I installed the clutch. I removed the brake, and I'll have to figure out what to do with the front brake a little bit later. But for right now, we're going to take our cable, our clutch cable, and unlike the previous cable, this one does not have an end on it. It's just kind of a piece of wire there. So right at the end of the clutch here, you're going to line up all of these pieces of metal so that we can slip our wire through here. It's better to start on the clutch. Put that all the way through. So there are 2 springs that come in the kit. The fat one is actually to help protect the wire from melting, from rubbing against the engine. So, and then this other spring is actually to put tension on this cable. So on the engine, there is a hole that we're going to string this through. We're going to run the spring up there to protect the wire. And right by the chain is this little arm. This arm actually moves in, and that's actually our clutch. So this will disengage this chain. So we're going to put the spring on the wire, and then we're going to put the wire through that hole. Some kits will have this metal arm with a screw right in here, so you would just tighten this up, tighten this cable really tight, and put the screw in here. This one actually came with a small metal bead here that goes through, and then we will use a little screw to help tighten that down. Now I got that cable nice and tight. Now when I pull the clutch, it'll pull that cable in. And that should disengage the engine. While we're down here, we'll go ahead and we'll install our tailpipe. That'll just bolt on right here onto the engine. Now with the tailpipe installed, it's time to see if the pedal is going to hit this. So let's go ahead and we'll pick the kickstand up and we'll spin this backwards. Now, my pedals are hitting this. So I'm not going to do it today. What I'm going to end up doing is I will heat this with a blowtorch to being almost red hot, and then I will bend this away from my pedals. Now we'll go ahead and we'll put our gas tank on. We'll use a couple of straps. Now be very careful when you're putting these bolts on, because I'm a little concerned that if you tighten these too tight, you could pull out the screws that are welded into this gas tank. So put it on that tight enough so it doesn't fall off, but not too tight that you rip the bolts out. Otherwise, you are buying a new gas tank. On this side of the fuel tank, you'll see where the exit valve is. We're going to take this fuel valve and we're going to put it right in there. So this one has a little filter that kind of came on it, just to keep sediment out of there, and it just bolts on. When you put this on here, make sure that this is facing outwards. Otherwise, you won't be able to turn on and off the fuel. And this is a safety feature. In case you're having it parked somewhere, in case the tank starts to leak, it'll stop right here before it leaks everywhere else. So coming out of the fuel tank, we're going to take our fuel line and run it in between the fuel tank and the carburetor. But we're going to put in a fuel filter as well. Now, if you look closely on this, you'll see an arrow of which way the fuel flows. So the hose will have to be cut, and then you just slide this on the ends. So the last thing we're going to do is we're going to install the spark plug. Now at the very top of the spark plug is a little piece of metal. You just unscrew this and you basically just throw that away. So when we put the spark plug in here, then we'll use this little cap to fit on top of the spark plug. Now if you remember before, we had this tool which helped put on our chain. This is going to help put the spark plug in. So make sure it's in there good and tight. And then we can put in our spark plug cap. So a correction for me, my spark plug will actually keep that little cap on. Keep this little metal cap on. But if it does not fit on there, then you can unscrew that. But apparently this kit will use a spark plug like it can. So basically that is the bike build. We have a few loose ends to clean up. We got to tie down a lot of these cables. We want to make sure that none of these cables touch the engine. This engine will get very hot and will melt through any of these cables that are touching it. That is why this spring is on this one cable that actually does touch the engine. So all we really have to do is put in some gas and test out the engine. The main things we need to make sure that we have are fuel, compression, and spark. And one of the big things we need to worry about is compression when we first put this bike together. We want to make sure there are no air leaks. And by that, I want to make sure that this little spout that comes out of the engine is good and tight and there's no air that can seep in there. And then we want to make sure that the carburetor is pushed good and tight in there and screwed down. Because any extra air that gets in the engine will kill the engine and not let it run. And that's why we also want to make sure that the head is bolted down. Right when I installed the engine, I made sure all these bolts were good and tight. I tested them to make sure that there's no air leaks getting in or around where the head seals onto the engine. And then that's why we also made sure our spark plug was good and tight. So the fuel that we'll be using for the first 3 gallons will be a 20-to-1 ratio. And that means for every 1 gallon of gas, we'll put 8 ounces of 2-cycle engine oil. This is a little bottle of oil that I bought from Walmart. I think I paid about $1.30 for it. This is 8 ounces. They do also have a 6.4 ounce. After our first 3 gallons of fuel at a 20-to-1 ratio, we'll switch that to a 16-to-1 ratio. And that would be 6.4 ounces of oil to 1 gallon. I always use a premium fuel when I fill up these bikes just to make sure that I get a high octane into this engine. So overall, this was a very simple project to do. Everything I needed came in the kit. Just needed a few basic hand tools to put it together. I'm gonna go give it a test ride tomorrow. It is a little late to do that tonight, but it just took me about maybe 6 hours to put it together today. Granted, I did build one other bike before, so it made it a little simpler and knew what I was doing. Still have a few loose ends to clean up, still need to put on the chain guard and still need to put on the hand grips. And then figure out what I'm going to do with that front brake. If you have any questions or comments you'd like to leave on this video, leave them down below and I try to answer everything I can. And make sure you check the video descriptions for anything I may add after I post this video. Hope you guys found this video interesting and thanks for watching.